Thank you, Andrew, for coming on to Radio Italia Uno today for our regular quarterly conversation.
Hi, Antonio. It's a pleasure to be here as always.
Well, the big topic being the budget that's been presented by the government. It contained a lot of material. What are the issues that are more relevant to you as a business chamber?
Yeah, it certainly did contain a lot. There's reform around capital gains tax, which is more significant typically than we see. We haven't seen that sort of reform around taxation in a budget for a long time. And I think, and we can touch on what that means for business. I think overarchingly also that it's quite an optimistic budget in the sense that the government seems to be assuming that the war in the Middle East will be over very soon and not having a long-term lag effect on the economy, so that we might have a couple of more interest rate hikes before the year is out, but then inflation will be pretty much under control by the middle of next year, which from my perspective, and I'm not an economist, so I'll preface that, but I do think that sounds relatively optimistic given the inflation issue was with us before the war, and the longer this goes, there'll be a lag in terms of the impact of fuel prices for many months ahead. They'll continue to wash through the supply chain and into the products, the goods and services we buy. So yeah, I think it's a reasonably ambitious budget from that perspective. You might have a thought about that too.
Yeah, actually, what you just said at the end, does that imply that you don't think the impact of the war has flown through to the consumer yet, apart from petrol, which is the obvious one, or diesel?
Yeah, the petrol hit everyone immediately, but some businesses are absorbing costs, others are passing them on. They're finding it difficult to push them through. And we've been surveying businesses to understand that, but I think there's still something like 60% of businesses are absorbing. So, that's not good for the long-term sustainability of businesses, but it perhaps means that we haven't seen the real knock-on effects on everything, on our food prices. You might be seeing it if you're going out to buy concrete or fertilizer or PVC pipes, because there's been a scarcity around those products. But if you're probably not seeing it quite yet in your fruit and vegetables.
That's something to look forward to expect in the future. You mentioned capital gains tax, and I've seen a commentary by you. And right now, just as we're connecting, I saw an article, posted on Twitter by Mark Di Stefano about some of the initial reactions to the change to the taxation of trusts. I'll mention what he's just shown. This might appear tomorrow, I guess, in the newspaper, Financial Review. Chris Ellison dumps 122 million of min resource stock amid crackdown on trusts. Maybe you can talk about how that matters, what the measures matter for trust, and then we can ask ourselves whether they matter substantially for the economy.
The trusts and the capital gains tax are independent of each other, but when you bring them together, they're both effectively taxation hits, if you like, for particularly smaller and family businesses who tend to use trusts. And a lot of this is specifically discretionary trusts they're talking about. A lot of smaller family businesses use trusts to protect their family assets. So they want to make sure that their business is separate from the family home, for example, in case their business fails, or their other assets are separate from the business in case it fails. They also like to use it to perhaps plan for the succession for their business, or protect or create a wealth income stream for their children and family, which is ironic given we heard a lot about intergenerational equity in this budget. But they use these, and I know some people say, well, isn't it just people trying to avoid paying tax? Look, there is an aspect of minimising taxation in there, but when you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur starting up a family or a small business, you are risking everything. You're really taking a punch. You've got so many things against you, and the chance of success is actually quite low. So many of these businesses fail. You need everything going in your favour. So a lot of these businesses require that sort of protection and hopefully a lower tax threshold to enable them to be sustainable and survive. We see it with farming communities, especially using them around protecting the family asset there as well. So they're taking this away from businesses and inflating the taxation rate is going to be a cost burden that these businesses are going to have to face. The government's given them 3 years of support to unwind the trusts. Now, that shows how complex they are or can be. So probably the winner out of this at the moment are financial advisors and accountants and lawyers who are going to need to do that work to help these businesses restructure perhaps the model that they set their business up from day one with, and a scheme or system that's been in place for decades. So all of a sudden the ground rules are changing and you can no longer structure your business that way. So you need to get professional advice to do that. So that's one. I can go on about capital gains tax if we have the opportunity now. Keep talking about that.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask, and I've also seen a post on LinkedIn by our common acquaintance Sim Penzo. I don't think he's very positively. Actually, we'll come back to that because the method he used was very interesting. So, how does capital gains matter to startups?
Okay, yeah. If you think about businesses that start up from scratch, often they're what we call bootstrapping in their early days. They don't have much in the way of cash flow. Whatever they're making is going straight back into the business, perhaps to bring on more staff, perhaps to do more innovation, and effectively build that business. What they're hoping for, if things all go to plan, and they really do, is that they'll be able to build that business up and sell it off, and that's when their payday comes. What we're hearing now is that the tax rate, capital gains tax, is going to be significantly higher by removing the 50% discount that's currently in place. So effectively, it's no different to selling a house. They'll be taxed on the capital gains for that business. Now, that if you start from nothing and you sell your business for $1 million, well, that's $1 million that's going to be taxed. If you start from a business, maybe you buy it for $500,000 and then sell it for $1 million, you're taxed on that $500,000 capital gain that you've made. So it's no different than buying a house. So what the government's brought in with a view of saying, hey, we're going to perhaps discourage investors in taking real estate stock out of the market, and that's a whole other conversation. What they've done is also capture, unintendedly, who knows, the business community in there as well, because they'll face the same issue.
Now, I understand they made a proviso that at least this part of the capital gains provision will be subject to discussions with the business sector.
You would have been good to do that before the budget.
Yes.
I would have thought. So we'll see what happens in terms of. It would be great to get carve outs for business or carve outs for certainly for small business. That'd be fantastic. But the message though that it sends is that if you want to invest in businesses in Australia, that you're going to be taxed and taxed quite heavily. And this is not just about the owner operator who's using their own money. It's also going to the broader market and saying, hey, would you like to invest your capital in a business in Australia? Well, guess what? The tax rules have changed. The tax could be quite significant if the business is successful. Or would you like to send your money elsewhere to another country where the tax regime is far more favourable to investors?
Yeah.
And capital markets are open pretty much. You can send your money where you want to send it.
We were talking about trusts and capital gains. I think the argument has been that capital gains, negative gearing, connecting the capital gains and negative gearing reforms, is the objective was to encourage investors in the housing sector to not to buy existing properties, but to buy new properties. And that is intended to increase the supply of housing and make it more affordable. That's probably not directly relevant to the business chamber, but do your members in that sector have a view?
Look, I haven't heard too many experts actually believe that this approach will bring more stock onto the market. I mean, right now we have a housing shortage that we are frantically trying to address.
Ecco, ci stiamo
We're back again.
Comincio a vedere che esiste. Andrew, we lost you.
Yes, we got you back. We
Yes.
just dropped out. Must be the weather.
Yep.
Must be the weather. I was just saying that I'm not hearing too many experts talk favourably about this as a means of getting housing stock back. We're frantically trying to find the workers and the builders to address the issue. It's interesting that Australia, we like to think that we're a country where people are encouraged to have a go, do their best. I mean, we've seen the migrant communities come to Australia and work hard and generate wealth and generate income. And it seems like the approach we're hearing out of this budget is really starting to put a bit of a dampener on that, and not necessarily encouraging that entrepreneurial spirit and penalising people. And I think it's also worth noting, there is a grandfathering clause around negative gearing, so it won't actually impact the market for a couple of years yet anyway. So hitting this housing crisis, I can't imagine it's going to make much of an impact. But a lot of Australians that negative gear are simply mums and dads who are looking for an opportunity to reduce their taxable income because of the PAYE system that we have that keeps pushing people into higher tax brackets every time they get a little bit of a pay rise and sends them back. So it's not as if everyone who's negatively gearing a property is a wealthy property magnate or tycoon. Look, there were a couple of wins for business in there, Antonio. We've been advocating for a long time that this instant asset tax write-off for small businesses should be locked in. What's been happening is that every year the government's said at budget time, okay, you can write off, you can make a purchase for your business and write it off up to $20,000, and we'll put it in this budget, but there's no guarantee it'll happen again. But now they've locked it in, so it's embedded year on year, which is good, because you'd like to think that if you've got an opportunity to buy something at a good price on the 1st of July, where you can do it with confidence, knowing that that's going to be locked in, which is great. There's also the opportunity for businesses who've finding it tough and losing money to actually roll that loss back against the last couple of years' tax returns. So if you've had to pay tax in the last 2 years, you can get some of that back, if you like, by offsetting your loss in this year against it.
Yeah, I thought that was quite innovative. I don't know if it is innovative, but I was a bit surprised by that one. It's an interesting approach.
Yeah, particularly when they've also said they're locking that in, which means it's not a one-off. So I think that'll be well received. And the final thing that we were really keen on, but we need to see the detail on, is we were always talking about red tape. We've talked about this on your program before.
Yes.
Businesses, compliance, bureaucracy, regulations. Well, the government said they're going to set out across a number of sectors to try and remove some of these duplications where you're providing the same information time after time to different departments or state, federal, local councils, etc. If that happens, that'll be fantastic. The words are relatively general in the budget, but at least the initiative is in there. So we'd like to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a never-ending story. I can remember, I can tell you, when I was working in the Prime Minister's department, the government went through a whole episode of trying to reduce microeconomic impediments to trade. It was mostly regulatory. And we're talking about, this would be in the second Hawke government, so mid-late 80s. It'd be a never-ending story, this one, but encouraging. Indeed. Now, yes, let me think. What's your cycle with the survey of the business?
With the survey, yeah. The survey is due out in about 2 weeks. It's closed, so I have seen the data. We also ran a survey a very short pulse survey, we called it, to understand the impact of the fuel crisis on businesses.
Wow.
And we did that before we ran the quarterly survey. And it's no surprise that I think there's less than 10% of businesses who say that they're not being impacted in some way. So 90% either minor or up to severe impacts on their business. And as you'd imagine, it's cost of fuel, it's cost of inputs they're getting where the freight costs are being added to it, or the supply is hard to get, and it's pushing prices up. It's squeezing their margins and their profitability. So that's something that we share with government. I sit on a round table that meets every Friday with the Treasurer, and we talk about all these issues that businesses across all sectors are facing. And for the first few weeks, it was all about supply and demand, shortage of fuel. That certainly smoothed itself out. I think there are no issues getting supply of fuel in Australia, and certainly South Australia right now. They talk about it being locked in till early June, and the federal government is continually making fuel purchases. But there's a but to this. The fuel that's keeping us happy today was all ordered before the war started. So what we're seeing is expected deliveries are all arriving as planned. What we don't know is if the war progresses, is there going to be a bubble or a gap from where we haven't been able to order fuel in the same quantities we're used to, where there's going to be a shortage? And that's the question no one can answer. And that's certainly the one that would be keeping the Treasurer and the Premier awake at night.
Yeah. And I said earlier, and we probably should need to close with this, Sim Panzo, he put a post on LinkedIn saying he'd used AI to get an understanding of the implications of the budget. And he said that the AI tool he used was asking him lots of relevant questions and gave him a very good précis. So, and in the end, the implication was he wasn't very happy with the budget. But it's obviously he seems to be making good use of AI. I'm presuming he's not the only one in South Australia, but we also hear lots of negative stories with that. How are you getting a feel for what the business sector is doing in South Australia?
Look, yes, more and more businesses are using it. Some only at the level of using ChatGPT, up to businesses that are using it to innovate and drive aspects of their businesses. But it is becoming very, very commonplace. And Sim's not alone. I took summaries from a number of different groups, accounting groups, economists, journalists, and plugged them all into AI to get a sense of what the overarching consensus was around key budget issues. And we'll use that as a tool like that as well. But yeah, certainly businesses are using software that will help them run their accounts payable, for example. There's software that AI-based that will do that, and it's reducing headcount, creating efficiencies. But the concern, I guess, is it taking jobs? And we're hearing big companies nationally talk about offshoring jobs, but also reducing jobs because AI is coming into their business. So that's a conversation for another time, and a big issue that I think we'll all be dealing with for the next few years.
Yes, but most importantly, critical is what you said. You put in known quality data, and you should expect to get good quality out. The problems occur when people are putting in zero or low quality data.
Yes.
Anyway,
correct.
So yes, thank you very much, Andrew. Have a good weekend. I hope it's not going to be too wet and whatever for you.
Wet for everyone, I think, this weekend. We could do with the rain. That's all okay. All right.
Yes. Okay, thanks.
Great
Bye.
to speak to you. Thanks, Antonio. Bye now.
Ok, questo era Andrew Kay, che è